everyone, John with Front Range Anglers here, and today I'm going to be tying up one of my Kreelex variations that are called just the baby Kreelex. Tied very similarly, but just slightly different sizing and colors used, so just a little variant overall. In the vise, I have a Gamakatsu B10S stinger hook in a size 2. I love tying on these hooks, they're fantastic. And then for the eyes that we're going to be using are going to be basically pearl white lead dumbbell eyes in white or fluorescent white. And then for the thread, same thing, I'm using a UTC fluorescent white thread. So when I line up my eyes, ideally I want to have just a little bit of section below the eye, mainly just to be able to lock in all our materials later on. So before we even get to that part, I like to start my thread pretty close to where I'm going to put my dumbbell eyes. Essentially, we're just going to wrap this all the way back the hook shank. Trim off our excess. We don't have to perfectly cover the hook shank, but ideally we're just going to take those thread wraps back just about to the tip of the hook. Work that back up.
Oh yeah, that's like the red multicolored.
Just to kind of give us a little bit of grip. We're tying in some of our body materials. And then when I'm back up here, I'm going to create just a little well or a dam with thread, just to kind of help lock in those dumbbell eyes. Doesn't need to be a lot, just a little indent, something like that. Perfect. Now we're going to fasten on our dumbbell eyes loosely with just a few X wraps and wrapping around the base. This way I can kind of adjust before I fully start doing my main wraps where I want the fit to be, but ideally that's kind of the position I like to have my eyes. The nice thing about this fly too is you can absolutely switch the size of the dumbbell eyes that you're doing. So these are larges, you can do them in mediums and smalls depending on the sink rate you want to do, which is the nice thing. So do our X wraps. Until that head of those eyes are pretty locked on, you can feel them, make sure they're relatively straight and just sitting how you like them. And to finish it off, I'll just do about 6 X wraps to really lock it in. And then for me, just because I do like to have a little bit of ensure the durability of the fly, I do a little bit of zap gap right on the top thread. Not a lot, just a little. I try to not bulk up the fly too much. And I'll just kind of spread that out. Ideally this just gives me a little bit more trust in the pattern, yet again helping out with the durability, just making sure it's pretty locked on. Something just like that. So now our thread is going to be behind our dumbbell eyes, and I'm going to go about halfway down from the dumbbell eyes and where our thread stopped. So from here I personally like to tie a few lateral scales of flash in there, so I'm just using a Flashabou and a pearl, and I'll get anywhere around 4 to maybe 6 fibers. I'm just using 4 right now. Something just like that. And then I'm going to tie these in facing me right on the side. Making sure they're staying nice and straight coming out the back of this fly, right along the side. Work that thread back up. And guess what? We're going to do the exact same on the other side. So we'll get 3-4 pieces again, or 4 to 6, whatever does your fancy. And lengthwise for these pieces, we are going to trim up at the very end to kind of help get the overall shape. But ideally we want the length to be about no shorter than 2 times the length of the fly when it's finished. So something like this gives us just a little bit of extra room to work, and we can trim up later, but ideally we will trim it to about 2 times the length. And then for this side, I'll get them sit in place, turn that vise upside down, and same thing as before. Get these strands and make sure they're tying straight on the side. Just like so. Work our way back up. And a little bit will get covered, so I'm not too worried about that right now. Alright, so then from here, we're going to move on to the silver. I'm just using a Flashabou in silver. And with this tail section, you don't need to get a crazy amount. But yet again, lengthwise, we're going to kind of want to go enough to where those fibers are pointing out about 2 times the length of that fly. So, and I'll show you kind of the handful I do. This is always the fun part, is measuring out the actual materials and getting them to be the right length. With this one, I don't count the strands. I basically just get a good enough grip. I'll show you kind of the amount I got. And this is longer, and I'll show you why, but something just like that, a nice little pinch, nothing too crazy, but enough that it's going to give a good tail, good flare out. Now from that section I cut to get all these fibers, because we do want them to be really even, I'm going to grab that section that I just cut really tightly and pull down. That is then going to get any of the little stragglers off, or the shorter pieces. And then I'm actually going to trim for my actual length, yet again roughly, because we're going to go up at the very end and trim. Alright, so we have our silver fibers here. I'm going to basically put those in at a down angle right below the eyes. Do 1 thread wrap, 2 thread wraps, just to kind of hold it in place. And I'm going to shimmy those fibers and jump just a bit. If you ever run into that issue, just go ahead and trim off the fibers, make sure they're really straight. Just go in again, right at that side. There we go. Ideally, we should have those fibers coming nice and straight off the back. Now, when I'm tying this down, if you notice, I'm pulling with my finger straight up. That's to keep these fibers high on the back of the fly and straight, because we do not want them to really wrap around the hook shank. We're wanting them to try to stay as tight and compact on the butt of this fly as possible. So we're going to wrap it back all the way down to where our flash was, and we'll work our thread all the way back up. I cover in some of those tie-in points of the silver. And then once we're there, 2 tighter wraps behind the eyes, and then we're going to be coming in front, the dumbbell eyes. We'll take our thread just about all the way to the top, and then we're going to work down to, yet again, as tight to the front of those dumbbell eyes as possible. It gives us as much real estate when we're tying in this next bit. So this is kind of what it should look like now. Now we're going to go back to the silver, and the only difference with this, we're going to be using about the same length, but we're going to be using twice as much material. So come in, And grab the amount of fibers that we want to work with. Something just like that now. So about twice as much, a pretty healthy amount. Go in. I'm going to trim all those ends nice and straight. I'm going to pinch right at the tip, do some pulls down to get them nice and straight. Now I'm going to adjust for length, and as you see as I'm pulling these through, I have shorter ones that come off. And you can just pull those straight out to make sure that they're the same length. Something just like that. Trim up the other side to get it nice and flat for the tie-in. Perfect. And then we are going to tie this in front of these dumbbell eyes. Now the biggest thing with this is when you're tying this in, instead of trimming all these out, we actually want to tie them all down. So yet again, I am going to do a very light wrap and then one little stronger. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to slide these fibers back until they're just below the eye, and if some pop out, that's fine. Then we're going to do our tighter wraps to really lock that down. I'm not really pulling back on these fibers yet. There we go, so we lost just a few, so that's fine. I'll hold those back. I'm going to wrap back to the dumbbell eyes, kind of building up that wall. Starting to build up the shape of the nose just a little bit. When we're tight, we're going to go underneath and wrap over the top. Yet again, I'm going to be holding this second section of Silver Flash straight up, nice and tight. Going to go under the eyes, do some tighter wraps to really lock it down, and then we're just going to work this thread back to just about the tie-in point of where our pearl was, something like this, nothing a whole lot. Build that up, make sure it's nice and strong. So from here, we now have that top part of the fly that's going to sit right on top like this. And right now it looks all the same length. Later we're going to trim it up to the right size. So at this point we're almost done. I'm going to go underneath again. We're going to flip the fly upside down because now we're ready to tie in that secondary color, whichever you choose. Like I said, we're going to be doing copper today. So yet again, just using Flashabou and a copper. Now, length with it is going to be the same as all the other tie-in points, about 2 times the length of the body. Or not 2 times, you can go about the length of the body with this. And we're going to be doing about the same amount as we did for the first or the rear part of Flash. So not the very, very thick amount, but just the thin kind of first starting part. Just like before, I'm going to trim off my fibers, grab one end, pull really tightly, grab the other end, pull really tightly to make sure we get out any loose ends. Then I will come in and give them a quick little trim to get them nice and even for the tie-in. And just like on top, we're going to be doing the exact same thing now underneath. One little straggler here. There we go. So I'm going to go in at an angle. I'm going to do 1 wraps, 2 wraps. Then I'm going to slowly pull those fibers back till they fully clear the eye of that hook. And from here we can start to build our tight wraps. And if it kind of jumps like that, that's fine. Now we can, Alright, So we are back. I got my thread retied on and connected, so once we have those copper fibers down, I'm going to go ahead to make my life easier later. I'm going to go ahead and grab these. Yet again, keep them upright. We're just going to build the nose of this. Make sure it's stacked pretty straight. Make sure it's wrapped down nice and tight. Cover any excess color you might see. And then we're basically done with tying in the materials at this point. For the most part, these fibers should be all relatively centered. Give them a little tug if need be, but those feel good there. We're just going to let them drop down from that point. And then if you need to do any adjusting on the nose or the upper part of this fly, you can, but goal is just to try to make it a smooth, relatively even taper. And we're just going to do our whip finish. Completely drop your whip finisher. Alright, so once that's tied, I just inverted the fly upside down. We're going to start trimming this up. So I'm going to start with the bottom on the copper, and ideally we're going to have the length going just to about the end. Oops, sorry, hands in the way. We're going to be wanting to cut off basically right where the flash hits the back bend of the hook. So I just pull it off to the side, kind of measure where that's going to be, hold all those fibers nice, high and tight. One fell swoop, boom. We got them cut just like that. We can preen them back just a little bit. And then from here we're going to do the same thing on the top silver part of the fly. Just grab all those fibers. The nice thing with it being spaced out and sectioned like this, just takes a little bit of convincing to get all the pieces together. That way you have to do less cutting overall. So grab all those. Length of this is going to be the exact same as the copper, just a little basically even with, let's see, let's get all spaced out. There we go. Just even with the back bend of the hook. Cut them straight. Now the main reason why we do two parts or 2 times the amount of material on the top part of silver is to get it to fan out nice and wide like this. It'll kind of fan out, which is a really nice aspect of this fly. Gives it a little bit of more structure. And then with these tail fibers, I'm going to go just about 2 times the length of the hook, so just about here. Trim those off. And then we have our nice two-toned baby Kreelex in one of my favorite color patterns. This thing is super slick, pretty easy to tie to. You get that nice segmentation between the tail and the actual body. And then in the water, this thing is crazy flashy. It's super effective. A great streamer pattern for not only trout, but bass, warm water, you name it. I mean, it's just a really cool pattern. One that I fish when it will actually swim through, have that nice brown side riding up. Super effective pattern, and one to definitely add to the arsenal, guys. So thanks for watching, and until next time, thank you.